Welcome to Carlisle's Chesapeake. We have two segments today, both talking about the oyster from the Chesapeake Bay. The first segment, we shot on location last week at Chesapeake Landing and Bay 100 in McDaniel, Maryland. And the second half, we're going to have Mark Salter, who is the chef at the Robert Morris Inn in Oxford, Maryland. And so we're looking forward to it. Hi, Joe. This is Joe Spurry, Jr., who is with us today at Bay 100 in McDaniel, which is in near Tillman Island and St. Michael's, Maryland. Joe, thank you for being with us today. We're here today to talk about the oyster and your family business with the oyster.
I started this business. We were all working on the water, harvesting our own crabs and oysters, and as my father outgrew the market, he began selling his own product, and did that for a few years, and eventually decided to get off the water and become a wholesale distributor of seafood from local products in the area. His primarily, and then his son, and his other son is still a full-time waterman. And that eventually grew very quickly to become Bay 100 Seafood. And then shortly thereafter, as the company grew, my father, mother, and myself, we started this restaurant, Chesapeake Landing, in 1991. And that's been growing ever since. So we continue to harvest crabs and buy from local watermen and distribute throughout the East Coast region, as far as New York and Canada, and as far west as California. Our products make it that far.
And you're on the Miles River?
We're near the Miles River. A lot of our products come from the Miles River and also the Choptank River and the local bay.
And the oysters that are coming in now, could you tell us about it, please?
Well, most of our oysters are all local oysters. They're all hand-tong or power dredge, and our power dredge oysters is what we primarily buy now, and they started on November 1st this year, like every year. And that's the primary oyster that we buy, and it all comes from the Choptank region. And these guys here are chucking those oysters. And in the restaurant every Friday night we got an all-you-can-eat oyster buffet, and all these products that we are prepping now will be served tonight in the restaurant.
Now, Joe, you are second generation. Is there a difference in the way your father, who was a waterman, he tongued his oysters versus what's being done now?
Very, very similar. The only thing that's new that happened in 2005, around that area, they opened a what they call power dredge, and it's been very successful. It's just a different means of harvest, and most people do that for the month of November, and then it gradually winds down, and then they'll go back to hand tonging or diving or whatever they normally do for oysters. But the best, the first November, pretty much everyone power dredges, and that's new to the area.
And when you do your power dredging or your tonguing, are there specific areas of the bay, the Chesapeake Bay, that you are allowed to harvest your oysters?
Yes, ma'am. There's the oyster industry, and along with the crab industry, the fish industry is highly regulated. Each means of harvest, diving, skipjack, power dredging, hand tonging, all have their certain areas to work in. There's some areas that can't sustain a power dredge, and they're off limits. There's only certain bars that are open for that, and certain bars open for diving and skipjack harvesting. And then we also are on a quota. It's 12 per boat, or 12 per man, or 24 per boat.
12 what?
Bushels of oyster
Bushels
per day.
Yeah. So can you harvest every day of the week, or are you required to do it on just certain days?
It's now 5 days a week, and it's been that way for a long time. When I was a kid working for my father, you could actually work a half a day on Saturday. And that the limits have constantly gone down along with the harvest, trying to sustain an industry. Now it's 5 days a week, and again, it's a bushel limit that's steadily gone from no limit to 75 to 25 to now 12 per person.
So you're able to maintain a good amount of oysters coming out of the bay, or how do you see it in terms of you are the vice president of the Talbot Watermen's Association.
Yes.
So could you speak about the oyster harvest, or what you're expecting for this year?
Well, the harvest is definitely it's a critical limits. We definitely are watching what we're harvesting. We can't take. That's why these limits are in place. It's in a bad way compared to what it used to be, and you always hear this 1% of historic levels, and that's, in my opinion, it shouldn't be even mentioned, because there's everything in this area is at 1%. The housing, the people, that's our main problem, is pollution. It's not harvesting. We're harvesting a limited amount.
Right.
It's what oysters have to grow in, and that's not conducive to good oyster harvest.
Right.
So that's our biggest problem, and it is a concern to all harvesters and restaurant owners and anyone that's involved with the environment.
And what are you talking about when you're talking about pollution and how it might affect the oyster?
Well, oysters feed on the water column. What's in the water column? They circulate water through them and grow and feed what's in the water, and they have treatment plants to have to treat all the effluent from every house, business, and for the 5-state region, from the Susquehanna clear down to us, and it's being overwhelmed. And unfortunately, the oyster needs to live and live and survive in that. It's not thriving, but it is surviving. We have a lot of young oysters right now that hopefully are gaining strength through the generations of oysters that are coming, and they're hopefully getting strong and able to live in that type of environment.
Well, that's an interesting thing, Joe. How old is an oyster? Normally when we eat oysters, if they're not aquaculture oysters, but oysters that are coming from the bay, how old are they when we eat them? Do you know?
Yes, generally, it's a rule of thumb. It's usually like an inch a year that an oyster will grow, and generally what we like to do is have a 3-inch oyster, which is like a perfect half shell size oyster. So pretty much it's a 3-year-old oyster.
And does the taste of the oyster change with each year that it gets older?
No, not really. No, the area dictates the taste. Again, it's the salinity level, what they're feeding on, that dictates the taste of the oyster. And we're in the mid-bay region, and our oyster is not considered highly salty. It's a more of a bland oyster, but it's actually, we're also in the most populated oyster region. And Broad Creek and the Chop Tank River are the best places to be right now to harvest oyster.
So what do you see on the horizon in terms of your being able to harvest the oysters? What would be your projections or hopes for this coming year in terms of what could be done for the bay to provide a better catch for you?
Well, every year we're involved in, many people say aquaculture. We're in a put and take industry, and aquaculture is a new thing on the horizon. Many people are involved with that, but basically the wild harvest is aquaculture. Every year at the end of the year in the spring, we replenish our oyster beds with seed or shell to enhance oyster replenishment every year. It's done for 60 years. I've been involved for 20 of that. Every year I work for the state and Oyster Recovery Partnership, trying to do that to enhance next year's harvest. So I hope we've had 4 or 5 good years We're on a little bit of a decline right now, and we see a lot of young, healthy oysters, and I hope that's a sign for the future.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.
Hi, Mark. How you doing today?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
This is Mark Salter, who is with the Robert Morris Inn in Oxford, Maryland.
That's correct.
And Mark, you've been on this side of the pond for how long?
Almost 25 years. I came here in 1993.
In 1993. And what was your first gig?
My first gig? Well, I don't know. I was working 100 hours a week, to be honest with you, and I very rarely got out of the kitchen for the first year. So there was a lot of work. We did a lot of weddings, and of course I was...
But where were you?
What do you, sorry, what do you mean, where was I?
Where were you? You were here on the Eastern Shore?
Yeah, in St. Michael's.
In St. Michael's?
Yes,
Yes, of
yes.
course.
Sorry, St. Michael's at the Inn at Perry Cabin,
Yes.
the world famous Inn at Perry Cabin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The world famous inn where the Meyerhoffs owned that before it was the Inn at Perry Cabin.
Correct, it was, and Mr. Meyerhoff owned it, and he also had that famous horse, Spectacular Bid.
Who won the Kentucky Derby
Yeah,
and the Preakness.
that's correct, yeah.
So anyhow, we're going to talk about oysters today.
We are, and of course I've learnt a lot of oysters since being here for 25 years. I've met a lot of the Watermen as well, and it's a great product to work with. And of course I cook with the seasons at the Robert Morris Inn, and we've just come into oyster season, so we're going to make this lovely oyster chowder.
It's called the chop tank.
Yeah, well, the oysters come out of the chop tank primarily. I know right now they're finding it a little bit difficult because the weather's been so warm.
It has been.
So what we're going to do is we're probably going to have to wait another couple of weeks to get some really nice fat chop tank oysters. So we've had them, I've bring them down from the bay a little bit, and what we're going to do is we're going to poach them in this stock that we're going to make with some onions and celery and leek and of course bacon. Everything tastes better with bacon.
Yes.
And we're going to make this great chop tank oyster oyster chowder. Sorry.
Cook on.
Okay. So what we have here is a little bit of olive oil. We'll just put that in our pan like this, and we're going to add our bacon. I'm just going to make a small amount in this pan here. Hopefully there's not a fire extinguisher in here. Oh, there is. It could get a little bit dangerous. So we're just going to mix that in like that. We've got to get that a little bit crispy. Add our onions and our celery and our leek. And I'm going to add a little bit of butter to that in a minute as well to add a little bit more flavour to it.
And Mark, while you're stirring this around, I want to point out to our guests that you are at the Easton Farmers Market.
Yep, and Salisbury Farmers Market.
Oh, okay. When's the Salisbury one?
Salisbury Farmers Market's on Tuesday.
Oh, good.
And it runs from 2:30 until 5:30 now. We've just gone to winter hours. And then the Eastern Farmers Market is from 8 in the morning until 1.
And at those markets, what do you sell?
Well, I make my own homemade soups, and my wife makes baked goods.
Nice.
So they're very popular, believe it or not, especially when the weather starts to get colder, or even in the summer I do gazpacho, so that sells very well.
And then you also have some kind of a sauce, don't you?
Yeah, well, I have the Eastern Shore pub sauce that I made back in 2004, and it sells in a lot of shops around here, up and down the East Coast. So I'm very fortunate with that, and people think, and I sell it also online as well. So
nice.
People can go to my website, which is Salter's Chesapeake Gourmet, and they can buy the pub sauce there, and I can ship it out to them.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about the Robert Morris Inn, please?
Yeah, the Robert Morris Inn was built in 1710. Robert Morris was an icon really, close allied to George Washington, and he was the financier of the Continental Army.
Right.
In the American Revolution against the British, and if he hadn't been there to provide food for the soldiers, then they probably wouldn't have made it. So he was a very important person back then, and so he came over from England to live in Oxford, and then his father moved him to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. And you have one of your children, you said, is in cooking school in England.
Yeah, my son James is in cooking school in England, and he's been there for a year and a half now. and he's doing the same course that I'm doing, and he's doing a real nice job actually. I'm very proud of him.
Nice.
And my daughter Charlotte is in Florida, and she worked at the Ritz-Carlton for a couple of years, and now she's working in a small restaurant there.
Where in Florida?
Naples.
Naples,
Yeah.
nice.
So they were very lucky to make it through that hurricane.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and then actually in a couple of weeks, well actually about a month, I go down to Marco Island and I cook I represent the National Pork Council. And I cook down there for them, and I do an end of year gala dinner. This will be I think my 8th year I'm doing it for them.
Very
So
nice.
everything on the menu's going to be pork, even dessert.
How are you going to do that?
Well, you know, brown sugar bacon is one of their favourites. So we've done that with, and you know, you put chilies in chocolate and brown sugar bacon. It's a great match. You wouldn't believe it.
Wow.
So spreading all these vegetables up here. We've got some bacon here. We've got some celery, some leeks, some onion,
Uh-huh.
and we're just going to cook that together.
Smells divine.
Yeah, it's good. It's very good. These really portable little stoves here are quite efficient, and they've got quite a lot of power, so it allows us to cook or saute or sear, which is very important in cooking.
Well, I have to tell everyone that last week the Atkins Arboretum had a native plant walk, a garden tour of 5 gardens, and so I came to Oxford and had the opportunity of popping in and having an oyster pot pie at the Robert Morris Inn. It was delicious.
Good.
Really
Actually,
delicious.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah, we feature oysters on the half shell right now. We do oysters Rockefeller as a special. We've got the oyster pot pie. So, you know, there's just a few of the oyster dishes that we have on, and we've changed it throughout the season, you know, the fall and winter season. Because you're only supposed to eat oysters when there's an hour in the month.
That's what I hear.
Yeah. So
But they're stretching that out a little bit now with the aquaculture, with the
that's
oyster.
true. That's true. That's why I don't like to serve them because when the weather gets too warm, you know, oysters should be nice and cold when they come to you, and served cold as well. And if you've got like 100-degree heat outside and you're serving oysters, not my favourite thing.
No.
So, you know, we cook with the seasons at the inn, and we've just changed to our fall menu. And so we have a lot of full things: butternut squash, acorn squash, spaghetti squash, you know, oysters, rockfish, you know, all the local stuff that, you know, that every restaurant around here should have.
Yes.
You know,
Coming from the Chesapeake Bay.
coming from the Chesapeake Bay. Okay, so here we go. Now, what we're going to add now is our white wine, which is right here. So
What kind of white wine do you use?
just a good just a table white wine. It's not going to do any damage to it. It's just going to give it a little bit of acidity, a little bit of flavour. You know, at the Robert Morris Inn, we do a lot of we have a winter program, and or fall winter program, and we've just started that. So I do cooking demonstrations. I've got one this weekend with Night Kitchen Coffee, Taylor Hale, and we've already got 24 people booked for that.
Nice.
Wine dinners, specialty dinners.
Well, my husband and I are coming in December for your Italian dinner that you're doing with Piazza.
That's right. I actually just tasted the wines yesterday.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so we've got some fabulous food to go with it.
Oh, yum.
So yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. So that's what we concentrate throughout the winter, because of course the winter's cold. Of course we've got 2 lovely fires. We've got an open fire in the tap room, and in the tavern we've got this lovely wood burning stove. And so it's just very, very cosy to come in the winter time.
It is cozy.
And of course we have a great comfort menu. We offer a comfort menu throughout the winter period for those who don't want to spend quite as much. And you come between 5 and 7, and you'll get a couple of courses for a very reasonable price.
Good. Now, I just want to tell everyone that where the Robert Morris Inn is located is right across the street from the dock of the Bellevue Ferry,
That's correct.
which I think is the longest standing operating ferry in the
That's it.
country.
Yeah, I think it probably is.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean the ferry is great for us during the summer. Obviously they close at the end of November, but during, from April right through to the beginning of November, lots of people come over from St. Michael's on day trips. Bikers, they do the loop, from St. Michael's to Oxford to Easton and then back down to St. Michael's again. So it's a great little mini vacation if you want to do that and you want to get some exercise at the same time.
Yes.
So we put the oyster juice in, the clam juices in there. We're going to add, we're just going to add the potatoes next.
Now, what kind of potatoes do you use?
Well, the recipe calls for red bliss potatoes, but you can actually use Yukon Golds, because what we're going to do is we're going to actually blitz half of it to give it a little bit of consistency. So that's quite important. So we're going to put a little bit of butter. I'm going to put just a little bit of butter in there as well. There we go. And then we just add, I'm going to add a little bit of Old Bay. Because Old Bay is very important.
Yes,
on the
very
Eastern Shore.
important.
Like that. And of course, this recipe that I'm going to provide for you is to serve 4 or 5 people. So,
But I get to have it all.
Yes, that's right. So I'm only making it for a couple of people here right now.
Well,
So-
the crew's smelling how wonderful this is.
So a little bit of, I'm just going to put a little bit more clam stock in there. And then what we do is bring this to a boil, and then we're going to blend half of it in our blender here.
Oh,
And then we're going to put it back in, so then you've got kind of like a thick soup with some garnish in there, some chunky
Nice.
bits of bacon, celery, leek, onion and potato. So it's just a really nice hearty dish for the fall and winter. And that's what we need, because it's going to get cold this winter, I bet.
yeah. Now, are you going to put the oysters in, and you're going to blend half of it?
No, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend half of it, and then I'm going to put the oysters in
Oh.
and poach them just quickly,
Oh, okay.
just so they curl at the edges and
Yes.
they're still, nice and tender.
Nice.
I think that's a big mistake. A lot of people just decide to, put everything in there, and then the oysters end up about that small instead
Yeah.
of being nice, fat, plump oysters like they should be.
Yeah.
All right. So there we go. Let's put this into the blender now. Okay. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this here and put it in my blender here like this. Okay. There we go. That should be enough. Perfect. And we'll just put that there. Just turn this down for a second. And then we put it on lid. And of course, you've got to be careful when you're blending with hot liquids. But what I tend to do, we have on this Vita Prep here, we have a soup mode.
Oh, nice.
So what happens is it starts off very slowly. And then it just starts going a little bit quicker.
Oh, it has a mind of its own.
Had in mind its own.
Nice. There it goes.
There we go. And that's it.
Okay.
So then we pour that back into
Oh, nice. It's like it's cream.
creamy.
Nice.
But then we haven't finished yet, because we're going to add the cream to it as well.
Oh,
So
oh.
we've got a little bit of cream we're going to add to it right here.
Oh, how wonderful.
And then we're going to finish it off with a little bit of cayenne, because the cayenne gives it a little bit of spice. And then I also want to put in my oysters. So I'm going to take a few oysters here and put those in.
They're beautiful.
Like that. Okay. So we put a few oysters in, and then we're just going to cook it gently for a couple of minutes. And then you can just use your tongs to pull out the garnish, like the oysters, and put them into the bowl, so that you
Oh.
know that you're not going to be missing an oyster, and you're going to get
So you can
your
count
fair
the
share.
oysters.
Yeah, it's very important to get your fair share of oysters.
For sure.
You're going to be shorted on some oysters, so that's that. And then we're just going to add a little bit of salt and pepper, just to finish. Put a little bit here.
Do you think that with the spices that there's a fair amount of salt in the spices, that you don't really have to put that much salt in?
Yeah, it's up to you. I'm a big fan of salt and pepper, because I think it really brings through the flavour of the food. Obviously, too much salt is going to make it salty, but there's a fine balance. Sometimes you can adjust your soups. Instead of using salt, you can use a gastrique, which is like a balance of vinegar and sugar. That
Wow.
also brings through the flavours as well.
Interesting.
So that's what I do as well with some of my soups. So let me just turn that back up again.
What'd you call that again? A gastrique?
A gastrique, yeah, that's what we call it, gastrique, yeah. It's a blend of vinegar and sugar. Usually, I learned that word from when we used to make tomato soup, or tomato soup, as you say over here. And we just added it at the end, and you just got your taste buds going. It brought through the flavours of the tomatoes, and that was just fantastic.
Nice.
So let's just wait for that now, and that'll be the soup. Now, I always recommend when you're serving soup, you've got to serve it actually in a hot bowl. So you would put your bowl in the oven, or your tureen if you're going to put it in tureen, and then put the soup in there, and then either ladle it out, take it to the table, depending whether you're doing it for the family or whether you're just doing it for like a party where you'll have so many bowls, like 8 bowls down the table. But it's the same with entrees. Hot plates deserves hot food.
Yes.
Hot food deserves hot plates.
Nice.
Same as cold. Cold food deserves cold plates. So many chefs make that mistake. They don't put their food on hot plates, and by the time it gets to the table, your food is cold.
Yes.
And and although we eat with our eyes, taste is very important. But just remember this: if your potato is hot on the plate, then your food will be hot. You'll get that because it works your brain. The potato has to be hot. If you have hot potato, it doesn't matter what. Everything else is hot. If your potato is cold, that's the thing you remember. kind of interesting.
One potato, two potatoes.
Yes. All right, so there we go. We're nearly there. This is just a fabulous stew here. Not
Does
stew,
it
like
smell
a chowder.
wonderful?
Of course, you can do a stew as well, which is just basically milk, potatoes, Old Bay, and a little bit of butter, and some lovely oysters. But in this case, we've done the chowder, and you can make it thicker than this if you want, but I'm just left it as it is. But the flavours come out from the oysters, and you've got a fantastic dish here. And like I say, this is a great lunchtime entree. Because it's got the potatoes in there, it's got that lovely heartiness to it, a nice piece of crusty bread, and you're good to go.
Oh, thank you so much, Mark, for coming today and sharing with us your cooking skills and this oyster stew.
All right, let's just ladle some of this good stuff up. I think we're about there, and as you'll see here now, I'm just going to put some of those oysters.
And look
in
how
there.
that oyster curled so nicely.
Yeah, curled beautifully.
Oh, look how pretty that is.
And then you can just like drain a little of that liquid off. There we go, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, and then all we do is we just take a little bit of chopped parsley here, because parsley just finishes it off with some lovely colour. And this is winter curly parsley. And there you are, Carlisle, a fabulous chopped tank oyster chowder.
Thank you so much, Mark.
You're welcome.
It's been a pleasure. You started us off the oyster season in November, which is a big time of the year here in Easton for the Waterfowl Festival.
Yep.
And can't wait to taste the stew. And we look forward to seeing you the next time.